Chapter 1: The Stranger at Death's Door. The thunderstorm hit Millbrook Valley like God's own wrath, turning the mountain roads into rivers of mud and debris. Dr. Isla Thorne pressed her face against the rain-streaked window of her isolated clinic, watching lightning tear across the sky. At 28, she'd grown accustomed to lonely nights, but something about this storm felt different, electric, dangerous, like the very air was holding its breath. Her phone buzzed against the wooden desk. Unknown number. Millbrook Emergency Clinic, Dr. Thorne speaking. Static crackled through the line, then a voice, deep, commanding, edged with desperation. "Doctor, I need your help. My friend is dying." Isla straightened, her medical instincts kicking in despite the late hour. "What are his symptoms? Have you called 9? A pause. When the voice returned, it carried a weight that made her shiver. "Roads are washed out. You're closer. Please. He's lost too much blood, and there's something else. Something you wouldn't believe if I told you. Try me." Isla was already pulling on her rain jacket, grabbing her emergency medical bag. After 5 years running the only clinic in this remote mountain town, she'd seen everything from bear attacks to chainsaw accidents. Silver poisoning. The words hung in the air like a curse. Isla frowned. "Silver isn't toxic, unless what, doctor?" The man's voice carried a strange urgency. "Please, I'm pulling up to your clinic now." Through the storm, headlights cut through the darkness, but something was wrong with the light. It seemed to shift and pulse almost alive. Isla's hand hesitated on the door handle. Every instinct screamed at her to wait, to call the sheriff, to do anything but open that door. Instead, she yanked it wide. The man who stumbled through was unlike anyone she'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair plastered to his skull by rain, he carried another man in his arms as if he weighed nothing. But it was his eyes that stopped her, cold amber gold like molten honey, and far too bright in the clinic's harsh fluorescent light. "He's dying," the stranger said simply. Isla's medical training overrode her unease. The unconscious man was pale as death, his breathing shallow and labored. Dark veins spread like spider webs beneath his skin, and when she lifted his shirt, she gasped. 3 parallel gashes ran across his chest, deep and precise, but already beginning to close with an impossible speed. "What did this?" she whispered. "Someone who wanted him dead." The amber-eyed stranger moved to the window, scanning the storm outside with predatory focus. "How quickly can you work, doctor?" "That depends on what I'm treating." Ella began cutting away the patient's shirt, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "These wounds are healing too fast for normal tissue regeneration. And you mentioned silver poisoning." "His name is Gabriel," the stranger interrupted. "And yes, he's been poisoned with silver nitrate, injected directly into his bloodstream." Isla's blood chilled. She'd read about silver nitrate poisoning in medical journals, experimental torture techniques used by military interrogators. The silver would crystallize in the blood, causing organ failure and agonizing death. "Who are you people?" she demanded, starting an IV line with practiced efficiency. The stranger turned from the window, and she saw something wild flicker in his eyes. "Someone who will owe you everything if you save his life. And someone who can protect you from what's coming." "What's coming?" Before he could answer, Gabriel's eyes snapped open. Not human eyes, something predatory, ancient, gold as summer wheat. His hand shot out, gripping Isla's wrist with inhuman strength. "The silver," he gasped. "It burns like hellfire. Make it stop." Isla's mind raced. She'd never treated silver poisoning before, but she knew the theory: chelation therapy, to bind the metal particles, aggressive fluid replacement, supportive care. But looking at Gabriel's impossibly fast healing wounds, she suspected normal medicine wouldn't be enough. "I need to know what you are," she said quietly. "I can't treat what I don't understand." Gabriel's grip tightened, his breathing ragged. "Dangerous, that's what we are. And now they know where to find us." The lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the clinic in red light. Through the storm, Isla heard something that made her blood freeze, the sound of engines, multiple vehicles getting closer. The amber-eyed stranger tensed like a coiled spring. "They found us faster than I expected." "Who found us?" Isla demanded, but her hands never stopped working. She'd prepared a chelation drip, her medical training taking over even as terror clawed at her chest. Hunters, Gabriel whispered, his eyes finding hers, and they don't leave witnesses. The stranger moved to her side, his presence both comforting and terrifying. My name is Kieran Cross, and whether you believe it or not, doctor, your life just changed forever. Headlights swept across the clinic's windows, not just one vehicle, but several. The engines cut off simultaneously, leaving only the sound of rain and Gabriel's labored breathing. Isla's hands trembled as she adjusted the IV drip. Whatever these men were, whatever they'd brought to her doorstep, there was no going back now. She was committed to saving Gabriel's life and to facing whatever nightmare waited outside in the storm. Gabriel's breathing began to steady as the chelation therapy took effect, the dark veins beneath his skin slowly fading, but his eyes remained fixed on hers, burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Thank you, he whispered, for not running. Kieran checked the locks on the clinic door, his movements precise and deadly. They're surrounding the building, 3 vehicles, maybe 12 men, all armed. Armed with what? Isla asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Silver bullets, silver blades, everything they need to kill our kind. Our kind. The words echoed in her mind as she monitored Gabriel's vital signs. His recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Wounds closing completely, color returning to his cheeks, strength flowing back into his limbs. Whatever he was healing. A knock echoed through the clinic, 3 sharp raps that sounded more like a death sentence than a request for entry. Dr. Thorne? The voice outside was smooth, cultured, utterly calm despite the storm. I'm Agent Morrison with the CDC. We need to speak with you about a potential contamination incident. Isla's eyes met Kieran's. The lie was smooth, professional, almost believable. They're not CDC, Kieran mouthed silently. Gabriel struggled to sit up, his recovery accelerating with each passing moment. Hello, he said, and hearing her name from his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Do you trust us? It was an impossible question. 2 hours ago, her biggest concern had been restocking medical supplies. Now she was harboring mysterious strangers who spoke of hunters and silver poisoning, whose very presence seemed to crackle with dangerous energy. But looking into Gabriel's golden eyes, she found her answer. Yes, she whispered. The knocking came again, more insistent. Dr. Thorne, please open the door. We're here to help. Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we fight. As if summoned by his words, Gabriel rose from the examination table, moving with fluid grace despite his recent brush with death. The last of the silver poison had been purged from his system, and what stood before her now was no ordinary man. He was something magnificent and terrifying, with power that seemed to ripple beneath his skin like contained lightning. Stay close to me, Gabriel said, his voice carrying an authority that made her knees weak. Whatever happens, Allah, don't let them separate us. The clinic's windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and rain as dark figures poured through. Isla screamed, but the sound was lost in Gabriel's roar, a sound no human throat could make, wild and primal and absolutely furious. The last thing she saw before chaos erupted was Gabriel's eyes blazing like twin suns, and the impossible truth finally irrevocably clear. She had just saved the life of a werewolf, and now, heaven help her, she was part of his world. Chapter 2, Blood and Fire. Time moved like honey as the first hunter burst through the shattered window, silver blade gleaming in the emergency lighting. Isla's scream died in her throat as Gabriel intercepted the attacker mid-leap, his movements impossibly fast and fluid. But this wasn't the wounded man she'd treated moments before. This was something else entirely. Gabriel's body contorted, muscles rippling beneath his skin as bones cracked and reformed, his jaw elongated, teeth sharpening to deadly points, and his hands were becoming claws. The transformation was swift, violent, and absolutely mesmerizing. He was becoming a wolf, but not fully, something caught between man and beast, more terrifying than either. Kieran, get her out! Gabriel's voice was a growl that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. He slammed the hunter against the clinic wall with bone-crushing force, silver blade clattering across the floor. Kieran grabbed Isla's arm, pulling her toward the back exit as 2 more hunters poured through the front windows. Move, doctor, now! But Isla couldn't move. She stood frozen, watching Gabriel tear through the attackers with savage efficiency. This was her clinic, her sanctuary, and these men had violated it. More than that, they'd come to kill her patients. I said, move. Kieran's grip tightened, his amber eyes flashing with desperation. The medical supplies, Asla gasped, finally finding her voice. If Gabriel was poisoned with silver, there might be others. There are others, Kieran confirmed grimly, and they're all dying. A new sound cut through the chaos, the deep, resonant howl of a wolf. But this howl carried something else, something that made every primitive instinct in Isla's body respond. It was a call to his pack, a summons that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. Gabriel's partially shifted form went rigid. When he turned to look at her, his eyes were pure gold, alien and beautiful, and utterly inhuman. More hunters are coming, he said, his voice distorted by his elongated jaw. Dozens of them. We have 30 seconds before this place becomes a war zone. Isla's medical training kicked in. Overriding her terror, she grabbed her emergency bag and as many medical supplies as she could carry. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Kieran said, but his tone suggested nowhere would ever truly be safe again. They burst through the clinic's back door into the storm. Rain lashed against them like icy needles, and the wind nearly knocked Isla off her feet. Gabriel had shifted back to human form, but his movements still carried that predatory grace that marked him as something other. The truck, he commanded, pointing to a massive black pickup parked behind the clinic. But as they ran, Ella heard engines roaring to life all around them. Headlights blazed through the storm, surrounding the clinic in a deadly embrace. They were trapped. Kieran's voice carried a warning. I know. Gabriel's jaw tightened as he counted the vehicles. 8 trucks, maybe 40 hunters. They came prepared for war. A spotlight blazed from one of the trucks, pinning them in harsh white light. A voice boomed across the storm, amplified by a megaphone. Gabriel Blackwood, Alpha of the Northern Territories, you are surrounded. Release the human and surrender yourself for judgment. Alpha. The word hit Elsa like a physical blow. Not just any werewolf, their leader, their key. Gabriel stepped protectively in front of her, shielding her from the spotlight's glare. Dr. Thorne, he said quietly, never taking his eyes off the surrounding hunters. I need you to listen very carefully. These men will kill you simply for helping me. There's no negotiating with them, no appealing to their mercy. The only way you survive this night is if you trust me completely. I trust you, she said, surprised by how easily the words came. Gabriel's shoulders relaxed fractionally, then hold on tight. He swept her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and suddenly they were moving faster than any human should be able to run. The storm became a blur around them as Gabriel sprinted between the hunter vehicles, Kieran flanking them with identical, impossible speed. Gunshots erupted behind them. Ola heard the distinctive whistle of bullets cutting through air, but Gabriel moved with supernatural agility, dodging and weaving through the darkness. The silver bullets won't kill us instantly, Gabriel explained as he ran, his voice barely strained despite their breakneck pace. But they'll slow us down enough for them to finish the job. They reached Gabriel's truck, and Kieran dove behind the wheel, while Gabriel deposited Isla in the passenger seat with surprising gentleness. His hands lingered on her shoulders for just a moment, warm, steady, reassuring, despite the chaos around them. Whatever you see tonight, Gabriel said, climbing into the truck bed, remember that we're still the same people who needed your help, the same people you chose to save. The engine roared to life, and Kieran gunned it. They crashed through a ring of hunter vehicles, metal screaming against metal as they carved a path through the ambush. Through the rear window, Isla watched Gabriel crouch in the truck bed, his body already beginning to shift again. Why are they hunting you? She shouted over the engine noise. "'Cause we exist," Kieran replied grimly, taking a corner at suicidal speed. "Because we're stronger, faster, harder to kill than humans. Because we represent everything they fear about losing their place at the top of the food chain." Behind them, the hunters gave chase. Their vehicles were faster on the straightaways, but Kieran knew these mountain roads like they were carved into his soul. He took turns that should have sent them tumbling into ravines, navigating by some impossible instinct through the storm-lashed darkness. Howl echoed through the night, not Gabriel's call from before, but something answering it. Then another and another. The pack, Kieran breathed, relief flooding his voice. They heard the summons. Through the storm, shapes moved in the darkness alongside their truck. Massive forms that ran on four legs, keeping pace with their desperate flight. Wolves the size of small horses, their eyes gleaming like captured starlight. Gabriel's pack had come for their alpha. How many of them are there? Isla whispered, watching the wolves flow through the forest like living shadows. In our territory, maybe 200. Kieran's smile was sharp with satisfaction. The hunters bit off more than they can chew. The lead hunter vehicle pulled alongside them, and Isla saw the driver clearly for the first time. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of cold intelligence that sent chills down her spine. When their eyes met through the rain-streaked windows, he smiled, a predator's smile full of terrible promise. Then Gabriel landed on the hunter's hood with bone-jarring force. Even partially shifted, Gabriel was terrifying to behold. His claws punched through the truck's metal like it was paper, and his weight sent the vehicle careening off the mountain road. It tumbled into the ravine below in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. Gabriel bounded back to their truck with inhuman agility, landing in the bed with cat-like grace. Through the rear window, Isla saw him shift fully back to human form, rain-soaked hair plastered to his skull, golden eyes blazing with righteous fury. He was magnificent. The turnoff is just ahead, Kieran said, taking another impossible corner. Once we reach Parklands, they won't follow. They're not that stupid. But even as he spoke, Eva saw doubt flicker in his amber eyes. These hunters had found Gabriel once already, had nearly killed him with silver poison. They weren't ordinary humans driven by fear and superstition. They were something much more dangerous. As they crested the hill, Esla saw their destination, a hidden valley tucked between towering peaks and visible from the main road. Ancient pines stretched toward the storm clouds, and scattered lights twinkled through the trees like fallen stars. It looked like home, it looked like sanctuary. Gabriel climbed through the truck's rear window, settling beside Isla with surprising grace for such a large man. His presence filled the cab, bringing warmth and the scent of rain and something wild. "Welcome to Blackwood Valley," he said quietly. "Population, 200 werewolves and one very brave human doctor." Isla looked back one final time at the world she was leaving behind. Her clinic was probably in flames by now. Her quiet life as a mountain doctor ended forever. But as Gabriel's hand found hers in the darkness, his touch sending electricity straight to her core, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was home. Chapter 3, The Hidden World. Blackwood Valley was nothing like Isla had imagined. As their truck descended into the hidden sanctuary, she pressed her face against the rain-streaked window, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't some primitive wilderness camp or collection of crude shelters. Elegant homes nestled between ancient pines, their warm lights glowing like beacons against the storm. Gardens and pathways wound through the forest with natural grace, and in the distance she could see what looked like a grand lodge built from massive timber and stone. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Gabriel's hand tightened on hers. "It's taken us 300 years to build this. Most packlands are temporary. We move when humans get too curious, start fresh somewhere else. But Blackwood Valley," he paused, golden eyes reflecting the scattered lights. "This is permanent. This is where we make our stand." Kieran pulled up to the Grand Lodge, and immediately they were surrounded. Not by the massive wolves Isla had seen during the chase, but by people, men and women of all ages, emerged from the storm, their faces etched with worry and relief in equal measure. "Gabriel!" A woman with silver-streaked auburn hair rushed forward as he climbed from the truck. "We felt your call, felt your pain. Are you—" "I'm alive," Helena, thanks to her. Gabriel helped Isla down from the truck, his hand lingering at the small of her back. The touch sent warmth spiraling through her despite the cold rain. "Everyone, this is Dr. Isla Thorne. She saved my life tonight." The crowd parted like a sea, creating a clear path to the lodge's massive doors. But Isla felt their eyes on her, curious, grateful, but also wary. She was human in a world of predators, an outsider who'd stumbled into their most sacred secret. "The hunters found you," said a tall man with prematurely gray hair and scars across his left cheek. His voice carried authority, but he deferred to Gabriel with obvious respect. "How many?" 40, maybe more. Gabriel's expression darkened. They knew exactly where to find me, Marcus. They had silver nitrate professional extraction equipment. This wasn't some backwoods hunting party. Marcus's scarred face went pale. The Order of the Silver Dawn. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Several pack members took unconscious steps backward, and Isla saw fear flicker in their eyes, real primal fear. "What's the Order of the Silver Dawn?" Isla asked. Gabriel and Marcus exchanged a look heavy with shared history. "The most dangerous hunters in existence," Gabriel said quietly. "They've been hunting our kind for over 1,000 years. They have resources, technology, government connections. They don't just want to kill us. They want to study us, weaponize what makes us different. And they found us," Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not us," Gabriel corrected firmly. "Me. They tracked me to Isla's clinic, which means they've been watching me specifically. The valley is still safe." But even as he spoke, Ayla could see doubt in his golden eyes. They'd found him once. They could find him again. "Come," Gabriel said, guiding her toward the lodge. "You need dry clothes and food, then we'll talk." The great hall of the lodge took Ayla's breath away. Soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams stretched above them, and a stone fireplace large enough to walk into crackled with welcoming warmth. But it was the people that truly amazed her, dozens of pack members moving with fluid grace, their conversations a mixture of English and something else, something that sounded almost like music. "Is that another language?" she asked. "Old Norse mixed with our own dialect," Gabriel explained, leading her to a chair near the fire. "We're old, Isla, older than most human civilizations. We have our own culture, our own traditions." A young woman appeared with towels and dry clothes, jeans, a soft sweater, and boots that looked like they'd fit perfectly. "I'm Luna," she said with a shy smile. "Well, I will be officially after the next full moon. Kieran and I are mated." Isla looked between Luna and Kieran, noting the way they gravitated toward each other like magnets. "Mated, like married," Gabriel said, "but deeper. Werewolf mating bonds are..." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "They're soul deep. When we find our true mate, it's not just love, it's recognition. Two halves of the same whole finding each other." Something in his voice made Ila's heart skip, but before she could analyze the feeling, Helena approached with a steaming mug. "Herbal tea," the older woman said kindly. "It'll help with the shock. What you've been through tonight, most humans wouldn't have survived it psychologically." Isla accepted the tea gratefully, inhaling the soothing steam. "Most humans don't get to save an Alpha King's life." Helena's eyebrows shot up. "He told you?" "The hunters announced it over a megaphone," Ella said dryly. "Gabriel Blackwood, Alpha of the Northern Territories, though I'm still not entirely sure what that means."
Gabriel settled into the chair beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It means I'm responsible for every werewolf pack from the Canadian border to Colorado. 43 packs, nearly 3,000 wolves. When they're threatened, they call on me. When they need justice, they come to me."
"And when someone tries to poison you with silver, they nearly start a war," Marcus added grimly, joining their circle by the fire. "Tell me about the silver poisoning," Esla said, her medical curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "How is that even possible? Silver isn't inherently toxic to human physiology." Gabriel rolled up his sleeve, revealing his forearm. In the firelight, she could see faint scars, old wounds that had healed imperfectly. "Silver disrupts our healing abilities. A cut that should close in minutes takes weeks. A bullet wound that should be minor becomes potentially fatal. But silver nitrate," he shuddered, "it crystallizes in our blood, turns our own healing factor against us." Who knew enough about werewolf physiology to devise something like that? Isla wondered aloud. "Someone who's been studying us for a very long time," Gabriel said darkly. "Someone who's had access to our kind before." The implication hung heavy in the air. The Order of the Silver Dawn hadn't just stumbled across werewolf weaknesses, they'd learned them through experimentation, through torture. "Gabriel," Kieran appeared at his alpha side, his expression troubled. "The perimeter scouts are reporting movement on the valley's borders. No direct approach, but they're out there, watching." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "How many?" Hard to say in the storm, but they're using heat signature equipment, night vision, military-grade gear. Isla's blood chilled. "They followed us." "No," Gabriel said firmly. "They can't track us here. The valley has natural protection, magnetic anomalies that interfere with electronic equipment. They might know we're somewhere in this area, but they can't pinpoint the exact location. Yet, Marcus added ominously, Gabriel stood abruptly, pacing to the massive windows that overlooked the valley. Rain still lashed against the glass, but beyond the storm, Isla could see lights moving through the forest, pack members taking defensive positions, preparing for a siege that might never come, or might come at dawn. I should leave, Gabriel said suddenly. Take a small group, lead them away from the valley. Let them follow me while the pack remains safe. No. The word escaped Isla's lips before she could stop it. Everyone turned to look at her, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. I mean, you were nearly killed tonight. You need time to recover fully. And if this order is as dangerous as you say, you can't face them alone. Gabriel's golden eyes found hers across the room, and something electric passed between them. You barely know me, Isla. Why do you care what happens to me? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Why did she care? 6 hours ago, she'd never seen this man before. She knew nothing about his world, his responsibilities, his past. By all logic, she should be terrified, demanding to be taken home, trying to forget everything she'd witnessed. Instead, she stood and walked to where he stood by the windows. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of leadership that pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Because, she said quietly, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for all of them. She gestured toward the pack members scattered throughout the hall. Luna and Kieran, Helena, Marcus, families and children, and people who built something beautiful here. And because, she paused, gathering courage, because when you held my hand in that truck, I felt safer than I've ever felt in my life. Gabriel's breath caught. He reached up slowly, as if afraid she might vanish, and cupped her face in his palm. His skin was warm, calloused from years of manual work, but infinitely gentle. Isla, he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I know this is insane, she continued, leaning into his touch despite every rational instinct screaming at her to pull away. I know I should be terrified, should run back to my normal, safe human life, but I can't. Something about you, about this place, it feels like coming home. Gabriel's thumb traced her cheekbone, and she saw something fierce and possessive flicker in his golden eyes. Do you know what you're saying? I'm saying I want to help, she replied. I'm saying that whatever comes next, whatever this order wants with you, you don't have to face it alone. Gabriel leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Ayla, there are things about my world, about what I am, that you don't understand yet. The bond you're feeling, it's not just attraction. It's something deeper, something that could change your life forever. Then explain it to me, she whispered. But before Gabriel could answer, a howl pierced the night long, urgent, full of warning. It was answered by another, then another, until the entire valley rang with the sound of wolves calling to their pack. Marcus was already moving toward the windows, his scarred face grim. That's the alarm call. The hunters aren't just watching anymore. Gabriel's expression shifted instantly from tender to deadly. They're testing our defenses. Through the storm, Isla could see lights moving at the valley's edge. Not the warm glow of pack members, but the harsh white beams of tactical flashlights. The Order of the Silver Dawn had found them, and this time they'd come prepared for war. Chapter 4, Shadows of the Past. The war room beneath the lodge was a stark contrast to the warm great hall above. Maps covered every surface, marked with red pins indicating packed territories, safe houses, and known hunter activities. Computer screens flickered with surveillance feeds from the valley's perimeter, and the air hummed with tension thick enough to cut. Gabriel stood at the center of it all, his commanding presence filling the underground chamber as he coordinated defensive positions with pack leaders via radio. Watching him work, Isla finally understood what it meant to be an Alpha King. This wasn't just leadership, it was the weight of an entire species on his shoulders. Delta Team reports movement along the eastern ridge, Marcus announced, studying a bank of monitors. Heat signatures suggest at least 20 hostiles, but they're maintaining distance. They're probing, Gabriel said grimly, testing our response times, mapping our defensive capabilities. The Order doesn't attack until they're certain of victory. Helena appeared at Isla's elbow with another cup of tea, her motherly presence a comfort in the midst of chaos. You should try to rest, dear. You've been through more tonight than most humans experience in a lifetime. I can't rest, Risley replied, watching Gabriel coordinate with his pack. Not while they're out there planning whatever they're planning. The waiting is the hardest part, Helena agreed. Gabriel's been fighting the Order for 15 years, ever since he became Alpha King. They've taken friends, family members, entire packs. It's a war most humans never know is happening. Isla's heart clenched at the pain in Helena's voice. You've lost someone to them. My mate, Robert, Gabriel's father. Helena's eyes never left Gabriel as she spoke. The Order captured him when Gabriel was barely 25. They kept him for 3 months before... She swallowed hard. Before Gabriel found what was left of him. The teacup trembled in Isla's hands. His father, Robert Blackwood, was Alpha King before Gabriel. Strong, wise, beloved by his people. The Order used him to perfect their silver poisoning techniques. Helena's voice turned brittle. Gabriel became king at 25 because he had to. Because there was no one else left to protect us. Isla's gaze found Gabriel across the room, seeing him with new eyes. The authority she'd admired wasn't born from arrogance. It was forged from necessity, tempered by loss and responsibility thrust upon him far too young. The burden nearly broke him, Helena continued quietly. For years after Robert's death, Gabriel threw himself into hunting the Order with single-minded fury. He was brilliant, ruthless, utterly dedicated to revenge, but also utterly alone. What changed? Isla asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Helena smiled sadly. He realized that being Alpha King meant more than vengeance. It meant building something worth protecting. So he created this. She gestured around the war room, the lodge above, the entire valley. Sanctuary where our children could grow up without fear, where our elders could live in peace, where love could flourish instead of just surviving. A commotion from the monitors drew their attention. Gabriel was leaning over Marcus's shoulder, studying something on the main screen. What are you seeing? Gabriel asked. Marcus enhanced the image, zooming in on a figure standing at the valley's edge. Even through the storm and electronic interference, the man was clearly visible. Tall, silver-haired, wearing what looked like expensive tactical gear. He stood completely motionless in the rain, staring directly into the camera as if he could see through it to the people watching him. Son of a bitch, Gabriel breathed. Victor Crane. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Several pack members took involuntary steps backward, and Isla saw genuine fear flicker across faces that had remained stoic through talk of 40 armed hunters. Who's Victor Crane? Isla asked, though the cold dread building in her stomach suggested she didn't want to know. The Order's current leader, Gabriel said, his voice deadly quiet, and the man who killed my father. On screen, Victor Crane lifted one hand in what might have been a greeting or a threat. Then he turned and disappeared back into the storm, leaving only empty forest behind. He's playing with us, Marcus said, letting us know he's here, that he's not afraid of our defenses. No, Gabriel corrected, his golden eyes fixed on the empty screen. He's sending a message. This isn't about the pack, about the valley. This is personal. Gabriel straightened abruptly, his decision crystallizing. I'm going out there. Gabriel, no! Helena stepped forward, maternal concern overriding protocol. That's exactly what he wants, to draw you away from the pack's protection. She's right, Isla said, surprising herself with her vehemence. You can't face him alone, not after what happened to your father. Gabriel turned to her, something raw and vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Isla, you don't understand. Crane has been hunting me specifically for 15 years. Every pack that's died, every life that's been lost, it's because he's trying to get to me. As long as I'm here, everyone in this valley is at risk. Then we make our stand together, Isla said firmly, all of us. You're not pack, Gabriel said gently, but his words cut deeper than any blade. You're human. You have no stake in this war. The casual dismissal hit as like a slap. She'd saved his life, abandoned her old life, chosen to stay and help, and he still saw her as an outsider. The hurt must have shown on her face because Gabriel immediately stepped toward her, regret flickering in his expression. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, Isla interrupted, her voice steady despite the pain lancing through her chest. And maybe you're right, maybe I am just human, just someone who stumbled into your world by accident. She moved toward the stairs leading back to the main lodge, needing space to think, to breathe, to process everything she'd learned. But Gabriel's voice stopped her. Isla, wait, please. She turned back reluctantly, noting how the entire room had gone silent, how even Marcus and Helena were pretending not to watch this exchange. Gabriel approached slowly, his hands raised as if she were a wild animal. He was afraid of spooking. I'm sorry that came out wrong. You're not just human, you're extraordinary. What you did tonight, saving my life, choosing to stay, it's more than extraordinary. It's miraculous. But Essa prompted, because she could hear the unspoken caveat in his voice. Gabriel ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly exhausted. But Victor Crane doesn't see the distinction. To him, you're leverage, a weakness he can exploit to get to me. And I won't let what happened to my father happen to you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. I saw past Gabriel's Alpha King authority to the young man who'd lost his father, who'd carried the weight of leadership through tragedy and loss, who was terrified of caring about someone new because caring made you vulnerable. Gabriel, she said softly, closing the distance between them, I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to let me help protect you and the pack and everything you've built here. How? The question was barely a whisper. I'm a doctor, Isla reminded him. If the Order is using silver poisoning as a weapon, I can develop countermeasures, treatments, maybe even preventive measures. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. You said werewolf healing is accelerated. With the right medical support, your people could recover from silver wounds that would normally be fatal. Gabriel stared down at their joined hands, something like wonder crossing his features. You want to fight a war with medicine. I want to fight a war with hope, Isla corrected, with the belief that we can save lives instead of just taking them. Gabriel's thumb traced across her knuckles, the simple touch sending electricity up her arm. She confirmed. Gabriel lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and utterly devastating in its tenderness. There's something you need to know, Gabriel said quietly, about what you're feeling, what I'm feeling. The connection between us, it's not just attraction or adrenaline or shared trauma. What is it? Isla asked, though part of her already suspected. The mate bond, Gabriel said simply, from the moment you touched me in your clinic, from the moment you chose to save my life instead of turning me away, it began forming. It's why you felt safe with me, why this place feels like home. It's why the thought of leaving you, of facing Crane without you, feels like tearing away part of my soul. Isla's breath caught. Are you saying I'm your mate? I'm saying you could be, Gabriel replied carefully. The bond is there, waiting, but it requires acceptance from both of us. Choice, it's not something that can be forced or... Around the war room, pack members had given up, pretending not to listen. Helena was practically glowing with happiness. Marcus was grinning despite the danger outside, and even the younger wolves looked hopeful for the first time all night. And if I choose to accept it, Isla asked. Gabriel's eyes blazed gold. Then you become pack, my Luna, my queen. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for her, my everything. Before Isla could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the underground chamber. Red lights flashed and every monitor in the room switched to emergency feeds, showing the valley's perimeter. Marcus's face went white. They're not just probing anymore, they're moving in. All sides, coordinated assault. On the screens, tactical teams advanced through the storm with military precision, not 40 hunters, hundreds of them, armed with silver weapons and equipment Isla couldn't even identify. Victor Crane isn't here for a battle, Gabriel realized, his voice filled with terrible understanding. He's here for a massacre. Through the chaos of alarms and shouted orders, Gabriel's hand tightened on hers. Whatever choice Isla made about the mate bond, whatever future they might have together, it would have to wait. The Order of the Silver Dawn had come to Blackwood Valley, and they'd brought an army. Chapter 5. The battle for Blackwood Valley erupted with the fury of a supernatural storm. Isla pressed against the war room's reinforced walls as explosions rocked the lodge above them. Through the surveillance feeds, she watched Gabriel's pack transform into their wolf forms and streak through the forest like shadows given deadly purpose. But for every wolf that engaged the enemy, 2 more hunters seemed to appear from the tree line. They've been planning this for months, Marcus shouted over the chaos, coordinating defensive positions on multiple radio channels. Maybe years. They know our patrol routes, our safe houses, even our emergency protocols. Gabriel stood at the center of the storm, his alpha authority keeping the pack organized despite the overwhelming odds. But Isla could see the strain in every line of his body, the weight of knowing that his people were dying to protect him. Gabriel, she called out, having to raise her voice over another explosion. Let me help. I can treat the wounded. Absolutely not, Gabriel cut her off, his golden eyes fierce with protectiveness. You stay here in the most secure part of the valley. Promise me, Ella. But even as he spoke, Helena burst through the war room's entrance, her face streaked with dirt and blood. The medical bay is overrun, she gasped. We have wolves down, silver poisoning, and no way to treat them properly. Gabriel's jaw clenched. The choice was impossible. Let his pack members die from treatable wounds or send his potential mate into danger. Asla made the choice for him. Helena, show me where, she said, grabbing her medical bag and heading for the stairs. Isla, no! Gabriel's command rang with alpha authority, the kind of voice that compelled absolute obedience from his pack. But Allah wasn't pack, not yet. She turned back to him, her heart breaking at the anguish in his expression. You said the mate bond requires choice from both of us. This is my choice, Gabriel. Let me save your people. Before he could stop her, she was running up the stairs with Helena, leaving Gabriel torn between his duty as alpha and his desperate need to protect the woman who was becoming his everything. The main lodge was a war zone. Wounded pack members lay scattered across the Great Hall, some in human form, others stuck in partial transformation due to silver contamination. The acrid smell of smoke and blood filled the air, and through the shattered windows, Isla could see muzzle flashes lighting up the storm like deadly fireworks. Here, Helena said, leading her to a makeshift triage area near the massive fireplace. Luna was hit by a silver round in her shoulder. Kieran's been trying to extract it, but werewolf anatomy is different from human. Isla finished, kneeling beside the young woman who'd welcomed her just hours earlier. Luna was pale as death, dark veins spreading from the wound like poisonous spider webs. Isla's medical training took over, pushing aside fear and chaos. She worked with swift precision, using her knowledge of accelerated healing to guide the extraction. The silver bullet came out cleanly, and almost immediately, Luna's natural healing began to overcome the poisoning. How did you know to do that? Kieran asked in amazement as color returned to his mate's cheek. Anatomy is anatomy, Ella replied, already moving to the next patient. The principles are the same, just accelerated. For the next hour, she worked miracles. Extracting silver fragments, neutralizing poisoning with improvised chelation therapy, treating wounds that would have been fatal to humans but were merely severe to werewolves with proper medical intervention. She was saving lives. Gabriel's people, her people, if she chose to accept the bond. But salvation came at a price. The attack on the medical area came without warning. Smoke grenades crashed through the windows, filling the Great Hall with choking gray clouds. Through the haze, tactical teams poured in, not the crude hunters from the clinic, but professional soldiers with military precision. Gas masks! Helena shouted, but it was too late. The smoke wasn't just concealment. It was laced with something that made Isla's vision blur and her limbs feel like lead. She saw Luna and Kieran fall, saw Helena collapse beside the fireplace. Around her, wounded pack members struggled to rise, but couldn't overcome whatever drug was flooding their systems. Through the chaos, a figure emerged from the smoke, like a nightmare given form. Victor Crane was nothing like the hunters Isla had imagined. Tall and elegant, with silver hair and intelligent gray eyes, he looked more like a distinguished professor than a genocidal monster. His tactical gear was expensive, perfectly fitted, and he moved with the confidence of a man who'd never known defeat. Dr. Isla Thorne, he said, his cultured British accent cutting through the chaos. At last we meet. You've caused quite a stir in our little community. Isla tried to speak, to call for Gabriel, but whatever was in the smoke had stolen her voice. She could only watch in growing horror as Crane's soldiers secured the Great Hall with ruthless efficiency. Please don't struggle, Crane continued conversationally, producing a silver-lined syringe from his gear. This will be much easier if you cooperate. We have so much to discuss, you and I. The needle bit into her neck, and the world tilted sideways. But as darkness crept in around the edges of her vision, Isla heard something that made her heart soar even as terror consumed her. Gabriel's roar of pure rage, echoing through the valley like the voice of an avenging god. He'd felt it the moment she was taken. The mate bond, incomplete as it was, had let him know the instant she was in mortal danger. Ah, yes, Crane said, noting her expression. The famous mate bond, one of our most fascinating subjects of study. Don't worry, my dear, you'll have a front row seat to our research. Consciousness faded, but Asla's last coherent thought was a prayer that Gabriel would find her in time. She woke up in hell. The laboratory was sterile, white, and filled with the kind of equipment that belonged in a horror movie. Examination tables equipped with silver restraints, vials of unknown substances, computer monitors displaying data she couldn't interpret but instinctively feared, and cages, dozens of them, containing shapes that might once have been human but were now twisted, broken things that whimpered in the artificial light. Fascinating, isn't it? Crane's voice came from behind her, cultured and pleased. 20 years of research into werewolf physiology. We've learned so much about your new friends. Isla tried to move and discovered she was strapped to one of the examination tables with silver-lined restraints. The metal burned against her skin, not agonizingly, but enough to let her know that escape was impossible. I'm human, she managed to say through a throat dry as dust. Are you? Crane moved into her field of vision, studying her with the intensity of a scientist examining particularly interesting specimen. Pure humans don't survive mate bonds with alpha werewolves, my dear. The psychic connection alone should have driven you mad within hours. What are you talking about? Crane smiled, the expression cold as winter. You felt it, didn't you? The moment Gabriel was poisoned with silver, the instant he was in mortal danger. That's not human empathy, Dr. Thorne. That's something much more interesting. He moved to a computer terminal, pulling up files that made Isla's blood run cold. Photographs of werewolves in various states of experimentation. Data charts tracking transformation cycles. And worst of all, family trees showing bloodlines stretching back centuries. Your grandmother, Crane said casually, Isabella Thorne, born 1923, disappeared 1943. We've been looking for her descendants for decades. The name hit Isla like a physical blow. Her grandmother, Isabella, the one her parents had named her after, the one who'd supposedly died in a car accident before Isla was born. You're lying. Am I? Crane pulled up another file, a photograph that made Isla's heart stop. It showed a young woman who looked exactly like Isla standing beside a massive wolf with golden eyes. Isabella Thorne, mated to Robert Blackwood, Gabriel's grandmother, Dr. Thorne, which makes you... The world tilted. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, crumbled in an instant. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? Why do you think you've always felt like an outsider? Why you became a doctor in an isolated mountain town as far from human civilization as possible? Why Gabriel's touch felt like coming home? Crane's smile was triumphant. You're not becoming Pac, my dear. You're remembering what you've always been. Before Ayla could process this revelation, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sounds of battle roars, gunfire, and the unmistakable howls of wolves in full fury. Crane's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to genuine concern. Impossible. This facility is undetectable, untraceable. A sound cut through the chaos that made every primitive instinct in Isla's body respond with fierce joy. Gabriel's howl, closer now, filled with deadly promise and absolute rage. The mate bond, Crane breathed, understanding dawning in his gray eyes. He's tracking the connection, but that should be impossible unless... His gaze snapped back to Isla, and for the first time, she saw fear flicker in his expression. Unless your manifesting ability. As if summoned by his words, something awakened in Isla's chest. A warmth that had nothing to do with temperature, a power that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The silver restraints, which had been burning her skin, suddenly felt cool and harmless. What's happening to me? She gasped. Crane backed away from the examination table, his face pale with something between terror and fascination. Dormant werewolf bloodlines can be activated by extreme stress, especially when paired with a mate bond, but the power levels you're displaying, they're off the chart. The laboratory shook as something massive slammed against the outer doors. Gabriel's roar echoed through the facility, and Isla felt an answering call rise in her own throat. Not human, not entirely wolf, but something in between that spoke of ancient power and unbreakable bonds. The silver restraint snapped like paper. Isla sat up on the examination table, power flowing through her veins like liquid fire. She could feel Gabriel getting closer, could sense his desperate need to reach her. More than that, she could feel his strength, his love, his absolute determination to bring her home safely. "This is impossible," Crane whispered, stumbling backward toward an emergency exit. "Dormant bloodlines don't manifest this quickly, this powerfully." The laboratory doors exploded inward in a shower of metal and concrete. Gabriel burst through in his partially shifted form, magnificent and terrifying, his golden eyes blazing with protective fury. Behind him came the cavalry, Marcus, Kieran, Helena, and dozens of pack warriors ready to tear the facility apart brick by brick. But it was the look in Gabriel's eyes when he saw her alive and unharmed that made Isla's newly awakened heart soar. "Hello, my love," she said, power making her voice ring with newfound authority. Gabriel shifted back to human form, crossing the laboratory in 3 strides to gather her into his arms. The moment they touched, the mate bond flared to complete blazing life between them. Isla felt his strength become hers, felt his love and relief and desperate joy flowing through the connection like a river of light. "I felt you," he whispered against her hair. "The moment they took you, I felt your fear, your pain. The bond led me straight to you." "It's not just the bond," Ela said, marveling at the power still flowing through her veins. "Gabriel, I'm not entirely human. My grandmother was Robert Blackwood's mate," Gabriel finished, wonder in his voice. "Which makes you pack royalty, Ella, my equal in every way." Across the laboratory, Crane had reached his emergency exit, but he turned back for one final revelation. "Enjoy a reunion," he called out, his voice echoing through the facility. "But remember, Dr. Thorne, or should I say Luna Blackwood, this was just the beginning. We know what you are now. We know what you're capable of, and we'll be back." He vanished through the exit, leaving behind the horrors of his laboratory and the promise of future conflict. But as Gabriel's lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their mate bond completely and forever, Isla realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of her alpha, surrounded by her pack, with power flowing through her veins and love burning in her heart. The war with the Order wasn't over, but for the first time, they had hope. They had each other. Chapter 6. 3 days after the laboratory rescue, Blackwood Valley had transformed into a fortress of preparation and power. Isla stood in the center of the training grounds, sweat beading on her forehead as she faced off against Marcus in hand-to-hand combat. Her newly awakened abilities were intoxicating: strength that let her match a seasoned warrior, speed that made her movements blur, and an instinctive understanding of combat that felt like awakening from a long dream. "Better," Marcus grunted as she landed a solid hit to his ribs. "But you're still thinking like a human. Feel the power, don't analyze it." Around the training ground, other pack members watched in fascination as their new Luna learned to harness abilities that should have taken years to develop. But the dormant Blackwood bloodline was strong, and the completed mate bond with Gabriel seemed to accelerate everything. Again, Isla said, dropping into a fighting stance that would have been impossible for her human body just days ago. But before Marcus could respond, Gabriel's voice cut across the training ground. "Enough for today," he approached with fluid grace, and even after 3 days of being mated, Isla felt her pulse quicken at the sight of him. The bond between them had only grown stronger, creating a constant awareness of each other that was both comforting and intensely distracting. "I'm not tired," Isla protested, though her body suggested otherwise. "Your body isn't tired," Gabriel corrected, his golden eyes warm with concern. "But your mind is. Awakening dormant abilities this quickly puts enormous strain on your psyche. You need rest." The care in his voice made something warm bloom in Isla's chest. She'd spent her entire adult life taking care of others, patients, the community, anyone who needed her medical expertise. Having someone worry about her well-being was both foreign and deeply appealing. One more round, she negotiated, unable to resist the urge to push her limit. Gabrielle's expression shifted, alpha authority mixing with mate protectiveness in a way that made her knees weak. Allah. The single word carried enough command to make every wolf in the training grounds lower their heads instinctively. But Isla wasn't just any wolf. She was his mate, his equal, and the power flowing through her veins refused to be dominated. Gabrielle, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. For a moment, the training ground fell silent as Alpha and Luna engaged in a battle of wills that crackled with supernatural energy. Then Gabriel's lips curved in a smile that was pure predator. As you wish, my love, he said, stepping into the sparring circle. But this time, you fight me.
The watching pack members took several steps backward, sensing the shift in energy. This wasn't training anymore. It was something far more primal, more intimate, more dangerous.
Gabriel circled her with predatory grace, his movements hypnotically fluid. Show me what you've learned, Luna.
I struck without warning, her new speed making her attack almost impossible to follow. But Gabriel was ready for her, deflecting her blow and countering with gentle precision that tested her defenses without causing harm.
They moved together like dancers, each attack and defense flowing seamlessly into the next. Gabriel's strength was overwhelming, but Isla's awakening abilities made her unpredictable, dangerous in ways that clearly delighted him. Faster, Gabriel commanded, his voice rough with something that wasn't entirely about combat. Stop holding back. Isla let loose, allowing the power in her veins to guide her movements. She became a blur of motion, striking from impossible angles, her body moving in ways that defied human limitations. Gabriel matched her pace for pace, but she could see the strain in his expression, the effort it took to keep up with her accelerating abilities. The moment she landed a solid hit to his solar plexus, sending him stumbling backwards, she realized what was happening. She wasn't just learning to fight, she was growing stronger, faster, more powerful with each passing hour. Impossible, Marcus breathed from the sidelines. Dormant bloodlines don't develop this quickly. Gabriel recovered his balance, his golden eyes blazing with something between pride and concern. Unless they're not dormant, he said quietly. Unless they've been suppressed. The implications hit Isla like a physical blow. Suppressed by who? By someone who knew exactly what you were, Helena said, appearing at the edge of the training circle with a thick leather journal in her hands. Someone who had access to you from birth. She opened the journal, revealing pages of handwritten notes in faded ink. I've been researching your family line since Gabriel brought you home. This belonged to your grandmother, Isabella. I found it hidden in Robert's study after he died. Isla took the journal with trembling hands, scanning the elegant script that detailed her grandmother's relationship with Gabriel's grandfather. But it was the final entries that made her blood run cold. The child will be born with power beyond imagining, she read aloud, but Victor Crane has threatened to take her, to use her as leverage against the pack. We've found a way to suppress her abilities until she's old enough to protect herself. The spell will hold as long as she remains unaware of her heritage. A suppression spell, Gabriel said grimly. That's why your awakening is so explosive. You're not developing new abilities, you're recovering ones that have been locked away for 28 years. Isla flipped through more pages, finding detailed descriptions of abilities she was only beginning to understand. Enhanced strength, speed, and healing, but also something more. Something that made her grandmother, Isabella, one of the most feared and respected Lunas in werewolf history. What am I? She whispered. You're a prime, Helena said softly. The first in 3 generations. A werewolf whose power doesn't just come from their wolf form, but from their connection to the pack itself. You can channel the strength of every wolf bound to you. As if to demonstrate, Isla felt a surge of energy flow through the mate bond from Gabriel, not just his strength, but his love, his determination, his absolute faith in her. The power was intoxicating, addictive, and terrifying in its scope. That's why Crane wants you, Gabriel realized, his expression darkening. A prime bonded to an alpha king could unite every werewolf pack in North America, could turn us from scattered survivors into a true nation. Or, Marcus added ominously, could be used to destroy us from within. Prime power works both ways. It can strengthen pack bonds or shatter them entirely. Before anyone could respond to the sobering thought, Kieran burst into the training ground, his face pale with urgency. Gabrielle, we have a problem, a big one. He activated a tablet showing news footage from cities across the country. The headlines were impossible to ignore. Mysterious animal attacks plague major cities. Government declares national emergency. Unidentified predators terrorize civilians. It started 2 hours ago, Kieran reported. Coordinated attacks in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami. But these aren't random animal attacks, they're werewolves. Dozens of them attacking humans in broad daylight. Gabrielle's face went white. That's impossible. No pack would break the silence laws so blatantly. They're not acting like pack wolves, Kieran interrupted. Watch the footage. They're mindless, savage, attacking without strategy or purpose, like they're being controlled. Isla studied the grainy video feed, her newly enhanced senses picking up details that human eyes would miss. The attacking werewolves moved wrong, too mechanical, too uniform, like puppets dancing to someone else's strings. Crane, she breathed. He's found a way to control werewolves. Gabriel's hands clenched into fists, his alpha rage building to dangerous levels. He's trying to start a war between humans and werewolves, force us into the open where his hunters can eliminate us with government backing. It's working, Helena said grimly, pointing to additional news feeds. The president is scheduled to address the nation in 2 hours. Military units are being deployed to major cities. They're calling it a national security threat. Isla felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a lid blanket. Everything that had happened, her grandmother's suppression spell, her awakening abilities, even meeting Gabriel had been leading to this moment. We have to stop him, she said. How? Marcus demanded. He has resources we can't match, technology we don't understand, and now he's got the entire human government convinced we're the enemy. Isla looked around the training ground at the faces of her new pack, Gabriel's people who had welcomed her without question, who had fought and bled to protect her. They were looking to her now, to their Luna, for answers she wasn't sure she possessed. But she had to try. We give them the truth, she said finally. We show the world what we really are, protectors, not predators. We find the controlled werewolves and free them. We expose Crane's manipulation. And how exactly do we do that, Gabriel asked, though his tone suggested he was already formulating plans. Isla felt the power in her veins surge, responding to her determination. We do what primes were born to do. We unite the packs. The training ground fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. What she was proposing was unprecedented. Not since the Great Wars of the 18th century had anyone attempted to unite all North American werewolf packs under a single banner. The conclave of alphas, Helena whispered, it hasn't been called in over 200 years. Then it's time, Gabriel said firmly, his alpha authority making the declaration ring with finality. Send the summons, every pack leader from Alaska to Mexico. If Crane wants a war, we'll give him one, but on our terms. But even as plans began forming around them, Isla caught Gabriel's arm, pulling him aside from the others. The moment they were alone, she felt the full weight of her fears crash down on her. Gabriel, what if I can't do this? What if the power corrupts me, turns me into something monstrous? She thought of the controlled werewolves in the news footage, mindless and savage. What if I become like them? Gabriel cupped her face in his hands, his golden eyes blazing with absolute conviction. That will never happen. Do you know how I'm so certain? How? Because you're asking the question, he said simply. Because your first thought isn't about power or revenge. It's about protecting people. That's who you are, Isla. That's why the mate bond chose you for me. Why your grandmother's bloodline awakened for you. You have the strongest heart I've ever known. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers in the intimate gesture that had become their private symbol of connection. Through the mate bond, she felt his absolute faith in her, his love, his unwavering belief that together they could face anything. We do this together, he whispered. Alpha and Luna, mates and equals, whatever comes next, we face it as one. Isla closed her eyes, drawing strength from his certainty, from the power flowing between them. When she opened them again, she wasn't just Dr. Isla Thorne anymore. She was Luna Blackwood, prime of the Northern Territories, mate to the Alpha King, and she was ready to fight for her people. But as they rejoined the others to begin planning the greatest gathering of werewolf leaders in centuries, neither of them noticed the small drone hovering in the tree line, its camera capturing everything they just said. Victor Crane smiled as he watched the feed from his new headquarters. "Perfect," he murmured. "Come to me, my dear Luna. Bring all your new friends. I have such plans for the lot of you." The war was escalating exactly as he'd hoped. And soon he would have both the Alpha King and the Prime exactly where he wanted them. Chapter 7. The conclave of Alphas convened at dawn in the heart of Blackwood Valley, and the gathering was unlike anything Isa had ever witnessed. 37 Alpha leaders had answered Gabriel's summons, representing every major pack from the Arctic Circle to the Rio Grande. They arrived in forms both human and wolf, some bringing their most trusted advisors, others coming alone with only their fierce pride for protection. The ancient amphitheater carved into the valley's northern ridge hadn't seen such a gathering since the treaty wars of Isla stood beside Gabriel's throne, a seat carved from a single piece of black granite that had belonged to Blackwood Alphas for centuries. She wore the ceremonial robes of a Luna, deep midnight blue embroidered with silver thread, but the traditional garments felt foreign against her skin. 3 days ago, she'd been a small-town doctor. Now she was expected to help unite an entire species. "You look terrified," Gabriel murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "I am terrified," she admitted, watching the assembled Alphas take their positions around the amphitheater. Each one radiated power and authority, their combined presence making the air itself crackle with supernatural energy. Gabrielle's hand found hers, their mate bond providing instant comfort and strength. "Remember what you told me about fighting a war with hope instead of just violence? That's what we're doing here." Alpha Regina Cross of the Pacific Northwest, a stern woman with silver hair and scars that spoke of countless battles, stood first. "Gabriel Blackwood, we answered your call because the old treaties demand it. But explain to us why we should risk everything we've built for your human mate's wild schemes." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathered Alphas. Isla felt their skepticism like a physical weight, their doubt in her abilities, despite the power thrumming through her veins. But before Gabriel could respond, Alpha Thomas Kane of the Texas Territories rose, his weathered face grim. "Because my pack was attacked 3 hours ago. Government forces armed with silver weapons, supported by helicopters and tactical teams. We lost 12 wolves, including 3 cubs." The amphitheater erupted in angry growls and sharp intakes of breath. More Alphas began speaking, each reporting similar attacks across the continent. "The Montana packs are under siege," reported Alpha Sarah Winters, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Military blockades on all major roads. Shoot on-site orders for any unidentified predators." "My territory in Florida," added Alpha Carlos Rivera. "They're using some kind of tracking technology we've never seen before. Found safe houses we've used for decades, bunkers that should have been undetectable." Gabriel's expression darkened with each report. "Crane isn't just starting a war, he's coordinating a genocide. While we've been planning unity, he's been positioning his pieces for a systematic elimination of our entire species." Isla stepped forward, her prime abilities letting her feel the collective fear and anger of every Alpha present. The emotion was overwhelming, but beneath it, she sensed something else, a desperate hope that anyone could offer them salvation. "I know I'm new to your world," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater. "I know most of you see me as an outsider, a human who doesn't understand the complexities of pack politics or supernatural warfare." Several Alphas nodded, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. "But I am a doctor," Isla continued, drawing strength from Gabriel's unwavering support through their bond. "And what's happening to our people, to all werewolf packs, is like a disease. A coordinated infection designed to weaken us by keeping us isolated, afraid, fighting alone instead of together." She gestured to the assembled leaders, her prime power beginning to resonate with each of them. "Look around you. 37 of the strongest, most intelligent, most capable leaders our species has ever produced. Crane fears this gathering more than anything else because he knows that united we're unstoppable." Alpha Regina's expression softened slightly. "And your solution is what, exactly?" "We can't fight the entire human military, even united." "We don't fight them," Isla replied. "We save them." A stunned silence fell over the amphitheater. Several alphas exchanged bewildered glances, clearly questioning her sanity. Explain, Gabriel said quietly, though she could feel his curiosity and growing excitement through their bond. Ursula took a deep breath, committing to a plan that was forming even as she spoke. The controlled werewolves attacking human cities, they're not our enemies, they're victims. Crane has found a way to override their free will, turn them into weapons. But what if we could free them? Show the world that we're not the monsters, that we're the ones trying to save both humans and werewolves from the real threat. Alpha Thomas leaned forward, his scarred face thoughtful. You're talking about a rescue mission in the middle of active war zones. It's suicide. It's hope, Isla corrected. It's showing humanity that we're not their enemies, that the real enemy is the one manipulating both sides into destroying each other. For a moment, the amphitheater buzzed with quiet conversations as alphas conferred with their advisors. Then Alpha Regina stood again, her expression transformed from skeptical to intrigued. It's insane enough that it might work, she admitted, but it would require perfect coordination, absolute trust between packs, and leadership capable of uniting wolves who've been independent for centuries. All eyes turned to Gabriel and Isla. The weight of their gazes was overwhelming, but through the mate bond, Isla felt Gabriel's strength become her own. Then we give them that leadership, Gabriel said, his alpha authority ringing through the amphitheater. Luna Blackwood and I will coordinate the rescue operations. Each pack contributes what they can. Warriors, resources, intelligence. We move as one, strike as one, save our people, and show the world our true nature. One by one, the alphas began to stand, signaling their agreement. Alpha Regina was first, followed by Thomas, then Carlos. Within minutes, all 37 leaders were on their feet, their combined power creating a resonance that made the very ground tremble. The conclave recognizes Gabriel Blackwood as Supreme Alpha and Isla Blackwood as Prime Luna. Alpha Regina announced formally, "May the ancestors guide your path and strengthen your purpose." The ancient words echoed through the amphitheater, sealing an alliance that hadn't existed for over 2 centuries. Isla felt the moment like a physical sensation, threads of connection spinning out from her to every alpha present, weaving a web of power and loyalty that spanned the continent. She was no longer just Gabriel's mate, she was Luna to every werewolf in North America. But even as triumph flooded through her, a new sound cut through the celebration, the whine of approaching aircraft growing louder by the second. Military helicopters, Marcus announced grimly, monitoring radio frequencies on a tactical device. Multiple flights converging on our position. ETA 3 minutes. Gabriel's expression shifted instantly from triumphant to lethal. Impossible. The valley's electromagnetic shielding should make us invisible to their instruments. Unless someone gave them our exact coordinates, Isla realized, her blood running cold. On cue, Victor Crane's cultured voice echoed through the amphitheater, transmitted from speakers hidden throughout the ancient stone structure. "Congratulations on your touching display of unity," Crane's voice carried smug satisfaction. "I do hope you enjoyed your little coronation ceremony, because it will be your last." The assembled alphas immediately shifted into defensive positions, but Crane continued speaking with maddening calm. "The electromagnetic pulse charges placed throughout your valley will detonate in approximately 90 seconds, disabling every piece of modern technology for a 50-mile radius. No communications, no vehicles, no way to call for help. My forces will then move in to collect the most valuable specimens, starting with our new Prime Luna." Isla felt Gabriel's protective fury blaze through their bond, but before he could act, explosions rocked the amphitheater. Not the EMP charges, something else. Something that filled the air with a sickly sweet smell that made every werewolf present stagger. "Silver nitrate in aerosol form," Crane's voice continued pleasantly, "delivered via drone deployment. You'll find your healing abilities somewhat compromised for the next several hours." Around the amphitheater, alphas were falling to their knees as the silver poisoning took hold, their supernatural strength drained away, leaving them vulnerable as ordinary humans. But Isla remained standing. The prime power in her veins seemed to neutralize the poison, her awakened abilities protecting her from Crane's chemical warfare. "Fascinating," Crane observed, clearly monitoring the scene through hidden cameras. "The prime bloodline provides natural resistance to silver contamination. How very convenient for my research purposes." Gabriel struggled to his feet, golden eyes blazing with determination despite the silver weakening his system. "Isla, run." Get out of the valley, find the other packs. No, she said firmly, her prime power flaring as she made her choice. We don't abandon family. Through her connection to the mate bond, she began channeling her uncontaminated strength directly to Gabriel. The process was instinctive, natural, but the drain on her energy was enormous. Gabriel straightened as her power flowed into him, his eyes widening with amazement and concern. Isla, you can't sustain this for long. Long enough, she interrupted, extending her awareness to the other fallen alphas. If she could channel strength to Gabriel, perhaps she could do the same for all of them. But as she reached out with her prime abilities, trying to create a healing network that would span the entire amphitheater, Victor Crane played his final card. I wouldn't attempt that if I were you, my dear. His voice carried genuine warning for the first time. You see, the silver aerosol was merely the opening gambit. The real trap was activated the moment you began using your prime abilities on such a scale. Too late, Isla felt it. A resonance in her power that didn't belong to her, a foreign frequency that was somehow hijacking her connection to the pack network. Sympathetic resonance technology. Crane explained with obvious pride. Every time you use your prime abilities, you strengthen the signal we're using to control werewolves across the country. The more power you channel, the more slaves we create. Horror washed over Isla as she realized the trap. Using her abilities to save the alphas would doom countless other werewolves to Crane's control. Choose quickly, Luna, Crane taunted. Save the leaders and damn the packs, or let your new allies die and preserve the free will of your people. Around the amphitheater, military forces were already rappelling from helicopters, silver weapons gleaming in the morning sun. The assembled alphas struggled against the poison in their systems, but without Isla's help, they would be captured or killed within minutes. Gabriel's hand found hers, his grip weak but determined. Whatever you choose, I support you. We face this together. Isla looked around the amphitheater at the faces of her people leaders who had trusted her, followed her, accepted her as Luna despite her human origins. Then she thought of the thousands of werewolves across the continent, free and fighting for their lives. The choice was impossible, but it was hers to make. With tears streaming down her face, Isla made the hardest decision of her life. She cut off the power flow to the alphas, letting her prime abilities retreat deep within herself, where Crane's technology couldn't reach them. I'm sorry, she whispered to Gabriel as military forces surrounded them. The last thing she saw before the tranquilizer dart hit her neck was Gabriel's eyes, blazing with love and understanding and absolute faith in her choice. Even as consciousness faded, she felt his voice through their bond. Find me, my love. Whatever happens, find me and finish what we started. Then darkness claimed her, and the war for the soul of both species began in earnest. Chapter 8. Isla woke to the familiar sterile light of Victor Crane's laboratory, but this facility was different, larger, more sophisticated, humming with technology that made her newly awakened senses recoil in instinctive fear. The silver restraints were gone, replaced by something far worse. A collar around her neck pulsed with blue light, and she could feel it suppressing her prime abilities like a constant weight pressing down on her consciousness. When she tried to reach for Gabriel through their mate bond, she found only silence. Magnificent, isn't it? Crane's voice came from behind a wall of reinforced glass. He stood in an observation booth flanked by military officials and scientists in white coats. The neural suppression collar. It doesn't just block your abilities, it records them, maps them, learns to replicate them. Isla struggled to sit up on the examination table, her body weak from whatever drugs they'd used to keep her unconscious. Where's Gabriel? Safe. For now. Crane gestured to a bank of monitors showing holding cells throughout the facility. In one, she saw Gabriel chained to a wall with silver restraints, unconscious but breathing. Other screens showed the captured alphas, each one secured in cells designed specifically to contain werewolves. In the packs, Isla demanded. Crane's smile was cold as winter. Under our control, the sympathetic resonance technology has been deployed nationwide. Every major werewolf population center is now subject to our influence. They attack when we command, retreat when we order, die when we desire. He activated another screen showing news footage from across the country. The werewolf attacks had escalated beyond anything Isla could have imagined. Entire neighborhoods under siege. National Guard units deploying silver ammunition, human casualties mounting by the hour. The president will address the nation in 2 hours, Crane continued conversationally. Emergency powers will be granted to eliminate the werewolf threat by any means necessary. Military forces, specialized hunter units, even nuclear options if required. Isla's blood ran cold. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about evolution, Crane corrected. Humanity standing at the top of the food chain where we belong, instead of cowering in fear of superior predators. We never wanted to be your enemies, Isla said quietly. No, but you were always our replacements, Crane replied. Faster, stronger, longer lived, with powers we could never match. The only advantage humanity has ever had is numbers and technology. Soon, even that won't be enough. He moved to a control panel, his fingers dancing over switches and displays. But your species has given us an incredible gift, my dear Luna. The ability to create our own werewolves, controlled from birth, loyal only to humanity. Imagine all the power of your kind, none of the troublesome independence. As if summoned by his words, figures emerged from the shadows at the laboratory's edges. They moved with predatory grace, but their eyes were empty, mechanical, werewolves in human form, but with no spark of consciousness, no hint of the wild freedom that defined the species. My prototypes, Crane said proudly, created using tissue samples from your mate and enhanced with data from your prime abilities, the perfect soldiers. Isla felt sick. Everything Gabriel had feared, everything the Pax had fought to prevent, was happening before her eyes. But as despair threatened to overwhelm her, she felt something else, a tiny flicker of warmth in her chest where the mate bond resided. Gabriel was awake, and he was angry. The neural collar couldn't completely suppress their connection, only muffle it. Through the thin thread of sensation that remained, she felt Gabriel testing his restraints, planning, preparing for something. There's just one final piece missing from my grand design, Crane continued, oblivious to the silent communication passing between mates. A prime Luna under our control, capable of commanding every werewolf on the continent simultaneously. He produced a syringe filled with silver liquid, but this wasn't the crude poison from before. The substance glowed with its own inner light, alive with malevolent purpose. Neural reconstruction serum, Crane explained. It will break down your existing personality and rebuild it according to our specifications. You'll retain all your prime abilities, but your loyalty will belong to us. You'll be our perfect weapon against your own kind. Isla strained against the examination table's restraints, but the neural collar made her as weak as any human. Gabriel will never stop fighting you. Gabriel will be the first to kneel at your feet, Crane replied. Imagine his horror when the woman he loves commands him to slaughter his own pack. The psychological damage alone should provide fascinating research data. As Crane approached with the syringe, Isla closed her eyes and reached deep into herself, past the neural collar's suppression, past the fear and despair, to the core of who she was. Not just Prime Luna, not just Gabriel's mate, but Dr. Isla Thorne, the woman who had dedicated her life to healing, who had saved Gabriel's life with nothing but medical knowledge and determination. The neural collar could suppress her supernatural abilities, but it couldn't touch her human skills, her knowledge of anatomy, chemistry, physiology that belonged to her mind, not her werewolf heritage.
As Crane leaned over her with the syringe, Isla made her move.
She twisted on the examination table, using her knowledge of human anatomy to target the precise nerve cluster in Crane's wrist. Her human strength wasn't enough to break her restraints, but it was enough to make his hand spasm, sending the neural reconstruction serum splattering across the laboratory. Alarms immediately began blaring as the spilled serum ate through metal and concrete like acid. Sedate her, Crane roared, but Isla wasn't finished. She'd noticed something during her brief examination of the laboratory. The neural collar around her neck was connected to the same resonance technology Crane was using to control werewolves worldwide. If she could overload that connection, instead of trying to suppress her prime abilities, Isla embraced them fully, pushing against the neural collar's restraints with every ounce of power in her body. The device began to spark, its blue light flickering as it struggled to contain energies it wasn't designed to handle. She's overloading the suppression matrix, one of the scientists shouted. If that collar fails, it could cascade through the entire control network. Crane's face went white with understanding. Stop her. If she breaks the resonance link, we'll lose control of every werewolf on the continent. But Ala was past caring about consequences. Power flooded through her as the neural collar began to fail, her prime abilities expanding beyond anything she'd experienced before. She felt every controlled werewolf across North America, trapped in the prison of Crane's technology, crying out for freedom. The collar exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Isla's scream of triumph, agony, liberation echoed through the facility as her prime power erupted outward like a shockwave. It raced through the resonance network, shattering Crane's control system, freeing every enslaved werewolf simultaneously. But the effort was too much for her human hybrid physiology. Blood ran from her nose, her vision blurred, and she felt her consciousness fragmenting under the strain. Through their restored mate bond, she felt Gabriel break free of his silver restraints, his alpha strength magnified by her power surge. She sensed the other alphas awakening, their abilities returning as Crane's suppression technology failed throughout the facility. Find them. Gabriel's voice echoed through their connection, filled with love and desperate concern. Find our people and bring them home. Using the last of her strength, Isla reached out with her prime abilities one final time, not to control or command, but to guide. She became a beacon of hope in the darkness, showing every free werewolf where to find their captured leaders, how to coordinate their attacks, how to turn Crane's own facility into his prison. The sound of Gabriel's roar echoed through the laboratory as he burst through reinforced doors with impossible strength. Behind him came Marcus, Helena, and dozens of pack warriors, their eyes blazing with righteous fury. But as her mate reached her side, gathering her into his arms with infinite gentleness, Isla felt her consciousness slipping away. The effort of breaking Crane's control network had pushed her beyond her limit. Stay with me, Gabriel whispered, his voice breaking as he felt her life force ebbing through their bond. Isla, please. We did it. We won. Stay with me. Through dimming vision, she saw Victor Crane backing toward an emergency exit, his face a mask of defeated rage. This isn't over, he snarled. You've won a battle, not the war. Actually, said a familiar voice from the laboratory's entrance, this is exactly over. Alpha Regina Cross entered, flanked by government officials in military dress. But these weren't Crane's allies. Their uniforms bore the insignia of a different agency entirely. Victor Crane, Regina announced with grim satisfaction, you're under arrest for crimes against humanity, unauthorized human experimentation, and treason against the United States government. As military police moved to arrest Crane, Regina explained to the stunned laboratory. The real government has been investigating Crane's operations for months. He went rogue from his official hunters unit years ago using government resources for his personal vendetta. Everything he told you about official sanction was a lie. Alla felt a spark of hope, even as darkness encroached on her vision. If the human government hadn't sanctioned the genocide, the president's address will announce a joint task force, Regina continued. Humans and werewolves working together to clean up Crane's mess and prevent future conflicts. A new era of cooperation instead of war. Gabrielle's arms tightened around her as she began to slip away. Isla, hold on. The pack needs you. I need you. But she was too weak, had given too much of herself to break the control network. Her prime abilities had saved thousands of werewolves, but the cost was her own life. I love you, she whispered, touching his face with a trembling hand. Tell our people they're free. Tell them they're home. Tell them yourself, Gabriel said fiercely. Fight, Isla, for us, for our future. For the children we'll have, and the pack will build together. As consciousness faded, Isla felt something impossible happening. The mate bond between them flared to blazing life, but instead of her power flowing to Gabriel, his was flowing to her. Not just his strength, the strength of every werewolf she'd freed, every pack member she'd saved, every alpha who owed her their lives. They were all giving back what she'd given them: love, loyalty, hope, and life itself. Her eyes snapped open, blazing with silver fire. The prime power in her veins stabilized, supported by the collective will of an entire species who refused to let their Luna die. Hello, my love, she said to Gabriel, echoing her words from their first rescue. His answering smile was brilliant as the sun. Hello, my everything. Around them, the laboratory echoed with the howls of free werewolves, the sound of victory, and the promise of a future built on hope instead of fear. The war was over, but their story, their pack, their love, their united species was just beginning. Chapter 9, 3 months later. The autumn moon hung full and silver above Blackwood Valley as the largest celebration in werewolf history prepared to begin. What had started as a traditional mating ceremony between Alpha and Luna had evolved into something unprecedented, a coronation, a wedding, and a declaration of unity for an entire species. Ala stood before the mirror in the Luna's chambers, hardly recognizing herself. The woman looking back wore a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to capture starlight in its folds, with a crown of silver and moonstone that had belonged to Gabriel's grandmother. But it wasn't the ceremonial garments that transformed her, it was the confidence in her eyes, the power that hummed beneath her skin, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "You're glowing," Helena observed, making final adjustments to the crown. Literally. "Your prime abilities are responding to your emotions." Eva laughed, noting the soft silver radiance emanating from her skin. "I can't help it. After everything we've been through, the fact that we're here, that we won, that you're about to mate bond permanently with the love of your life in front of 3,000 witnesses." Luna added with a grin. She'd recovered completely from her silver poisoning and had become one of Isla's closest friends. That might have something to do with the glowing. Through the chamber windows, Isla could see the transformed valley below. Representatives from every pack in North America had come to witness the ceremony, their campfires dotting the forest like fallen stars. But more remarkably, human observers were present too, government officials, scientists, even news crews documenting this historic moment of species cooperation. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of change. Victor Crane's exposure had led to a complete restructuring of human-werewolf relations. The joint task forces Alpha Regina had mentioned were already operational, with werewolf packs working alongside human authorities to address supernatural crimes and protect both species from extremist threat. Isla had found herself at the center of it all, not just as Gabriel's mate, but as the bridge between two worlds. Her medical expertise had proven invaluable in developing new treatments for silver poisoning, while her prime abilities made her the natural leader of the United Werewolf Council. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Gabriel entered, magnificent in the traditional black leather and silver of an Alpha King. The sight of him still made her breath catch, not just because he was devastatingly handsome, but because of what he represented: strength, honor, protection, and a love so deep it had literally saved her life. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," Isla protested, though she made no move to turn away. "Old human superstition," Gabriel replied with a smile that made her knees weak. "Werewolf tradition says mates should never be apart on their bonding day." He crossed the room to her, his golden eyes warm with adoration and desire. "Besides, I have something for you." He produced a small velvet box, and Isla's heart skipped. "Gabriel, the crown is already—" "Not jewelry," he interrupted, opening the box to reveal something that made tears spring to her eyes. It was a locket, antique, silver engraved with intertwining wolves. Inside was a photograph of her grandmother Isabella and his grandfather Robert on their own mating day, looking impossibly young and radiantly happy. "Helena found it in Robert's study," Gabriel explained, his voice soft with emotion. "Your grandmother left it for you along with a letter." With trembling fingers, Isla unfolded the yellowed paper he handed her. Her grandmother's elegant script seemed to glow in the lamplight. "My dearest granddaughter, if you are reading this, then the suppression spell has broken and you have found your way home to the Blackwood Pack. I pray that your path has been easier than mine, though I suspect it has been equally filled with love." The locket contains a blessing passed down through generations of prime lunas. Wear it tonight and you will carry the strength of all who came before you. But more importantly, you will carry the hope of all who come after. Build something beautiful, my dear one. Build something that lasts. With all my love, Grandmother Isabella. Isla clutched the locket to her chest, feeling a connection not just to her grandmother, but to all the Luna Queens who had worn this same blessing. Gabriel fastened the chain around her neck with infinite gentleness, his fingers brushing her skin and sending familiar electricity racing through her. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," she confirmed, though her heart was pounding with anticipation. They emerged from the lodge to find the entire valley transformed into a cathedral of nature and magic. Thousands of werewolves in both human and wolf forms had gathered in the ancient amphitheater, their combined presence creating an energy that made the very air shimmer. Luna and Kieran stood as witnesses along with Marcus, Helena, and all 37 alphas who had survived Crane's assault. But it was the human delegation that truly moved Isla. President Martinez herself was present, along with Secretary of Defense Williams and other high-ranking officials who had chosen cooperation over conflict. Even Dr. Sarah Chen, the scientist who had helped develop the neural suppression technology, was there now working to ensure such devices could never be misused again. The ceremony itself was unlike anything in human experience. Ancient words in the old language mixed with promises in English, creating vows that bound not just two hearts but two souls for eternity. When Gabriel placed the Luna's crown on her head, Allah felt the weight of responsibility and the strength of an entire species flowing through her. "Do you, Allah Thorn, accept the bonds of mate and pack Luna and Prime to stand beside Gabriel Blackwood as equal and partner for all the days of your life?" Alpha Regina intoned, her voice carrying the authority of centuries. "I do," Asla replied, her voice strong and clear. "Do you, Gabriel Blackwood, accept the bonds of mate and pack, Alpha and King, to stand beside Allah Thorn as equal and partner for all the days of your life?" "I do," Gabriel said, his golden eyes never leaving hers. The moment their lips met in the ceremonial kiss, the mate bond flared to blazing completeness between them. But this time, instead of just connecting two souls, it created a network that touched every werewolf present. For one shining moment, Isla felt the hopes, dreams, and love of an entire species united in celebration. When they finally broke apart, the amphitheater erupted in howls of joy that echoed across the mountains. Wolves ran through the forest in celebration, their voices raised in songs that spoke of freedom, love, and hope for the future. As the formal ceremony gave way to the celebration feast, Isla found herself surrounded by well-wishers from both species. President Martinez approached with a warm smile, extending her hand in congratulation. "Prime Luna," the president said formally, then dropped the title with a grin. "Isla, what you've accomplished here, the bridge you've built between our peoples, it gives me hope for the future." "The future is what we make it," Isla replied, feeling Gabriel's pride through their bond. Together. As the evening progressed, she watched humans and werewolves mingling freely, sharing stories and laughter around the celebration fires. Children from both species played together in the flickering light, their joy a promise that the next generation would know cooperation instead of conflict. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Gabriel appeared at her side with 2 glasses of champagne, his presence as comforting as a warm embrace. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Esla mused, accepting the glass with a smile. "6 months ago, I was a lonely doctor in a mountain clinic. Tonight, I'm Luna, queen of an entire species, married to the love of my life, surrounded by family I never knew I needed." Gabriel's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close. "Any regrets?" Isla considered the question seriously. Her old life had been quiet, safe, predictable. This new existence was anything but filled with responsibilities that sometimes felt overwhelming, dangers that kept her constantly alert, and a love so intense it sometimes took her breath away. "Not a single one," she said finally, leaning into his warmth. As if summoned by their contentment, Marcus approached with an expression that immediately put both of them on alert. "I hate to interrupt the celebration," he said quietly, "but we've received intelligence reports you should know about." Gabriel's posture shifted subtly, Alpha authority replacing celebratory relaxation. "What kind of reports?" Crane had allies we didn't know about, international connections. There's been chatter about retaliation for his arrest, plans to continue his work through other channels. Isla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "How serious?" "Serious enough that the joint task forces are recommending increased security protocols," Marcus replied. "Not just for tonight, but going forward. The war may be over, but there are still battles ahead. For a moment, the weight of the future pressed down on Isla's shoulders. There would always be those who feared what werewolves represented, who preferred hatred to understanding. The path they'd chosen wouldn't be easy. But as she looked around the celebration at the faces of her pack, her people, her family, she felt her grandmother's locket warm against her skin, carrying the blessing of generations of strong women who had faced their own challenges with courage and love. Let them come, she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of a prime luna and the determination of a woman who had already overcome the impossible. We'll face them together just like we've faced everything else. Gabriel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the natural ease of perfect partners. Through their bond, she felt his absolute agreement, his unwavering support, his love that would endure any trial. Together, he agreed, lifting their joined hands to his lips for a gentle kiss. Above them, the autumn moon shone down on the celebration, its light blessing the union of Alpha and Luna, the cooperation of species, and the promise of a future built on hope instead of fear. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in warning or challenge, but in pure joy. The sound was picked up by another voice, then another, until the entire valley rang with the music of freedom. But even as they celebrated, both Isla and Gabriel remained alert, ready to protect what they built. They had found their happily ever after, but they knew it would require constant vigilance to maintain. As the evening wound down and the guests began to disperse, Gabriel swept Isla into his arms, carrying her toward their new shared chambers. As tradition demanded, she laughed at the theatrical gesture, but her heart soared at the promise it represented. "So, my Luna Queen," Gabriel murmured against her ear as he carried her across the threshold, ready for the next adventure. Isla's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, where she'd begun to sense the tiniest flutter of new life, the beginning of the next generation of Blackwood wolves. She hadn't told Gabriel yet, wanting to be certain, but through their bond, she felt his sudden stillness as he sensed the change in her. "Is that," he whispered, wonder filling his voice. "Our future," Isla confirmed, watching joy transform his features. "Our pack, our legacy." Gabriel's kiss was tender, reverent, filled with all the love and promise of their bonded lives. When they broke apart, his golden eyes blazed with happiness. "I love you, Isla Blackwood," he said, her new name sounding like music on his lips. "I love you too, Gabriel Blackwood," she replied, sealing their vow with another kiss that tasted of moonlight and forever. Outside their window, the valley settled into peaceful sleep, protected by the strongest Alpha King and Prime Luna in werewolf history. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight belonged to love, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that held their pack together. The war was over, their reign had begun, and in the distance, barely audible over the celebration's dying echoes, the sound of engines could be heard approaching the valley's borders, a reminder that their greatest test might still be yet to come. But wrapped in Gabriel's arms, feeling their child growing within her and surrounded by the love of their united pack, Isla faced the future without fear. Whatever came next, they would meet it together. Alpha and Luna, mates and equals forever.
The end. Which moment touched you the most? The reunion with her grandmother's legacy, the species uniting ceremony, or the promise of new life? Share it in the comments, and if you loved this journey from Lonely Doctor to Luna Queen, hit subscribe so you're here for the next epic love story. If Isla's journey from Lonely Doctor to Luna Queen left you breathless, wait until you see what happens when a human nurse accidentally saves a dying vampire prince and wakes up to find her hospital surrounded by an army of the undead. The next story is even more intense, more romantic, and absolutely impossible to stop watching. Click the video appearing on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Thank you for staying with Isla and Gabriel until their happily ever after.